All right, we're going to try this again. So welcome to Neurotransmitters, Cell Communication, Part 2. And let's just get into it. So I suppose if you recognize that we are actually all part of this matrix, you would be able to tap into my first recording where I forgot to hit record. Or the second recording where there was music and recorded the music rather than my voice. Right, so hopefully this time you can hear my voice. So neurotransmitters are how our nervous system communicates with the rest of our body. So hormones were from endocrine tissues and neurotransmitters are coming from our neurons. And those of you who had some anatomy, this will be a little bit of review, this first part, and then we're going to look at how the chemistry of the neurotransmitters or the biochemistry. So the basics that you all need to know is down in this lower corner here. And so the neurotransmitters, this is one neuron to the next. The neurotransmitters are in these little vesicles, these little boats. And when a signal comes down the neuron and says something's going on, these neurotransmitters, this little boat becomes part of the membrane. The boats are actually the membrane, and they release their load. And these neurotransmitters swim across the channel and they bind to the receptor. So it's showing right here, this guy's bound to the receptor. And then the neurotransmitter never enters the cell. It just tells the receptor on the other side of this channel that you got to send the signal on. And so this channel, this cleft, is called a synapse, and it is 1 nanometer in size. So the width of your hair is a micrometer, so this is 1,000th of the width of your hair. So I don't, how do we know it's that size? And the size of these neurotransmitters is about 1/10 that size. They're probably a little bit more than that, so they're about half that. So they don't have far to swim, but it is an arduous journey, that short distance. So the idea, the big picture is how neurons send signals down their pathway. They're these long cells, is a change of ions. And these ions are accumulate on one side by a pump. And again, in anatomy, you learn about the sodium potassium pump. And what happens is they're waiting for it to be told that they can go back inside. And a gate has to be open. And it's the neurotransmitters, when they bind their receptor, they say, open the gates. And the gates open and there's a flood of ions in each direction and this potential moves. Ions are charges, so it's just like how an electrical wire works. So with the electrical wire, it's electrons moving down the wire. Here, it's ions that are flowing in and out. But the key is a gate has to open, and the neurotransmitters tell the gate to open. All right, so these are going to be our classes, the chemical classes of neurotransmitters. So the first one is the cholinergic, and there's only one example here, and that is acetylcholine. And we'll talk about each of these examples. This is the second example is a polypeptide, or the second class, and examples include endorphins. Enkephalins are the same thing as endorphins. That was the European name for them. Most people now accept the name endorphins. And some more examples of polypeptides. There are new ones found pretty much every day. These guys are all small. They're like 3 amino acids or maybe 8 or 12 amino acids. They're really small. So they're not called proteins, they're called polypeptides. Substance P, the P stood for pain. And pretty much these guys all have to do with somehow our perception of pain. Do we feel pain? Do we not feel pain? And like last term, Miranda talked about neuropeptide that has to do with exercise. And if you think about it, there is, how is our perception of pain when we're exercising? So we're able to exercise more, or we stop exercising and stuff. All right, another category is amino acid derivatives, and these are also known as the monoamines. So the polypeptides and amino acid derivatives, we saw those with hormones also, but there's going to be different examples here. There is one exception, and our amino acid derivative that was a hormone was epinephrine. and that is also a neurotransmitter. So epinephrine is the one molecule that is made in our adrenals, which is a endocrine gland, and released and goes around our body. And it's also released from our neurons, so it's also classified as a neurotransmitter. But in this category of neurotransmitters, there's 5 of them. And these are our molecules of emotion. So serotonin, dopamine, and melatonin, they're usually associated with feeling good. Epinephrine and norepinephrine is that the fear response. So we'll get to that and we'll talk about each of them. All right. The 4th category is amino acids. So amino acid derivative means the amino acid has been changed. The carboxyl group, CO2, has been removed. So that's why they're called monoamines, because they still have the amino group. These, GABA, glutamate, and aspartate, and there's a couple more, they actually are true amino acids. So they can be building blocks for proteins, or they are actually released from neurotransmitters as neurotransmitters. And then there's actually more categories now. And so I just put these under other. So adenosine is actually one, and we'll see this at the end of the slideshow. So adenosine is a modified nucleotide. We haven't talked about nucleotides yet. Anandamide is a modified fatty acid. So it's a fatty acid derivative and a nucleotide derivative. So like we have the amino acid derivative. So our body's pretty clever. It uses something for one thing and then a slight modification, and we can use it for something else. Now this picture over here, these are the neurotransmitters. So the action potential is moving this way from upper right down. So here's little vesicles, and signal comes down, they're released, and they go across and they bind the receptor. So notice they never go inside. The space again is called the synapse in between. And so this is presynaptic, and then post-synapse is where the receptors are. And this is actually a much better picture. And the space in between, again, is called a synapse. There's the word there for those of you who've never heard that word. That's really all you need to know. And so presynapse, they're released, and postsynapse is where the receptors are. And there's one more character here, and that is this enzyme. I call them sharks. These enzymes are going to change the neurotransmitter and make it inactive. And so that's going to be important as we go through looking at this biochemically. Now, the different classes behave differently, and so let's walk through them. The first one is acetylcholine. And again, if you've taken anatomy, or when you take anatomy, you will learn this one in a lot of detail because somebody figured out a lot about it in detail. It is really important because it is communication between neurons and also communication between neurons and your muscles. So it tells us, you know, what to do. So muscle movement and also neuron communication. It is made up of an acetyl group or acetyl group, which is 2 carbons, and we're going to see this when we get to metabolism, and also a choline group. So this is 2 carbons here with a nitrogen. And the key about acetylcholine, which makes it special and different from all the other categories, besides being so crucial because it's communicating between our neurons, the receptor is the ion gate. That means it is going to be super duper fast, a microsecond. This thing, boom, it binds the ion, it binds the receptor, the gate is open. Everything else, it's going to be steps to get the gate open, and so they're going to be a little bit slower. But their purpose is a little bit different, so it doesn't need to be quite as fast. And so here's a picture of the receptor. And so acetylcholine would bind here, and then the receptor changes shape and opens up. All right. This is another picture. So here would be the acetylcholine. Agonist means something that binds there. And so the receptor is called the nicotinic receptor. That's like extra detail you get to learn in anatomy. And so when it binds, the receptor opens up and we get a flood of ions in. So the ions come in. Now, something that's really important, that is really important for acetylcholine, the gate always has to close. That's true for all of them, which means the receptor has to close. And the only way the receptor can go back to this closed is the acetylcholine has to be broken down. So remember those sharks? That's crucial here. And that is different from all the other ones we're going to walk through. This is just me being geeky, that this is our receptor looking down on it. And so it's a great example of quaternary structure. So the fourth level of protein structure means we have different subunits. So you can see 5 different ones here. I love to think of my neurotransmitters and my receptors as being vivid, colorful also. And yeah, I think we reflect what's inside of us. And so I dress in lots of colors. So maybe if you want your neurotransmitters and receptors to be colorful and vibrant, dress in more colors. This would show the acetylcholine binding, and the gate opens up. This is also a great example. Secondary structure is an area of regular pattern. So there's our beautiful alpha helices. And then this part would be the part that's inside the membrane. So it's hydrophobic, and it's a lot of beta sheets. And you guys remember our cell membranes, the 2 layers there? All right, let's move on. So this is about that enzyme. Let's remember the shark. And what happens is it hydrolyzes acetylcholine. So hydrolyze means to cut. Hopefully you've got that down. Very first or second quiz, I had that word, and it always baffles students, even when we're face to face. But hopefully now you've started to see it more, and it means to cut. And so ASE ending means enzyme, and they gave it a perfect name. So it's going to cut the acetylcholine. Now, something that's interesting, and is something I already mentioned, is the acetylcholine has to be broken down so it leaves the receptor, because the receptor has to close again. If the gate doesn't close, you can't send another message. And these messages are going all the time. So this is all happening super fast, all under a second. And again, it's because the ion gate is the receptor. And so it's opening, and then it has to be broken down and closed. Much faster than I could talk. And again, the gate must close to re-establish the action potential. This is unique to acetylcholine. It's why it can act so fast. And so you need an empty receptor so you can re-establish the potential, and the gate can open again. Half of the acetylcholine actually gets eaten up before it even makes it across. It's kind of like those turtles. Eggs get laid and they never make it to the sea, but there's so many molecules going across that it works. All right, and there's the shark. Really important, very misunderstood. All right, we're gonna play a game. It's called agonist or antagonist. So green agonist, that would be acetylcholine, and that's something that will open the gate and then get broken down and close the gate. So it's something that makes this all work. An antagonist is something that's going to interfere somehow. So in the case of being an antagonist for acetylcholine, it could be something that opens the gate, but if it can't be hydrolyzed, the gate stays open and you're paralyzed because the muscle contracts and now it can't extend. All right, so let's look at an example. This is what acetylcholine looks like. There's the nitrogen with its methyls. And this is curare, which is poison dart frog, and it looks somewhat similar, like each of these areas, but it's too bulky. So the enzyme, the shark, the hydrolase, can't cut it, and so it just stays in the receptor, and the receptor stays open. All right, so some examples here. Here's our receptor. Acetylcholine binds and will open, and we get normal movement. And curare binds, and the receptor stays closed. Or cobra toxin binds, and the receptor stays open. And this top one is belladonna, which is deadly nightshade, which is called that because it's a toxin, and so they all paralyze you. So the poison dart frog, right, they take the rubbing from their skin and they put it on the arrows and they shoot it at the animal, right, in the Amazon or wherever in the rainforest, and the monkey or whatever is paralyzed, and it doesn't kill them, it just paralyzes them. So poison dart frogs are extremely adorable. All right, and this is also the idea of some muscle relaxants. So the agonist, would be like acetylcholine. It binds, opens up, and then it can close. This would be something that's an antagonist. So it blocks the gate from opening, or it blocks the gate from closing. Okay, which both would block this. We have to close the gate. So these are some man-made ones. The bottom one I know just a little bit about. I had a student many years ago who was a paramedic. And so he actually came in and talked about this. So when they intubate, when they put a tube down your throat, they you have a gag reflex. So even if you're in a coma, you're passed out, you're going to gag it up. And so they have to paralyze that response to be able to intubate you to get you to breathe again, which is fascinating. So you can see it looks just like acetylcholine. It's just reflected on itself. So the enzyme can't break it down. And so it's going to keep the gate either open or it's going to block the gate. Either way, it's an antagonist. Another example of an antagonist and another way you can block is Botox, so botulism toxin. So these are all toxins, which tells you it's an antagonist. And when you're dealing again with acetylcholine and you antagonize it, it doesn't work, you're paralyzed. Your muscles can't move. And so what this one does, these are microtubules, which is how our body communicates with itself. They're pretty cool, but Botox blocks it. And these guys were actually what says, so those little vesicles carrying the neurotransmitter, they tell it, hey, release. So Botox actually prevents the acetylcholine from being released into the synapse. All right. And most people think of Botox because it makes your skin look like you're 22 forever and ever. I had a really dear family friend. When we were small, we'd go to their house and her eye would always twitch. So she had this twitch and I was like, why does she have a twitch? You know, as a kid, you look at it. Well, they started injecting those muscles in these people who had that with Botox, and it would stop twitching because it would paralyze that muscle. So it's just very small dose, very localized. And what they found after 20 some years is these people never developed wrinkles around their eyes. So they have these beautiful face. And so it became a beauty item. But I would like to remind all of you, my dear students, beauty comes from within you, not from a photoshopped picture of yourself. Hence why you're going to meditate for a week to find that inner beauty. Quick comment about choline and eggs. The highest source of choline is actually from eggs, and it's in there because it's part of what keeps it's part of lecithin, which emulsifies the cholesterol in the egg yolk. But if you're somebody who eats a lot of animal products, your gut bacteria is different from somebody like me who doesn't eat many animal products. And the choline, what happens is that bacteria cuts this piece off and you're left with trimethylamine, which is known as TMA. And trimethylamine is then oxidized in the liver and becomes something not so good. They don't know why this happens. It only happens in people who eat a lot of meat, which is pretty much Americans and everybody imitating Americans. So they don't know if the liver of people who eat animal products is just so overwhelmed because of all the toxins you're exposed to, such as carnitine. So carnitine is absolutely needed in our pets. Our cats have to have carnitine in their diet, but we do not. It's not essential for us. Or if it becomes toxic because the liver's trying to detox it. It doesn't really matter what's going on. It's a toxin, and huge linkage. TMA, high levels of oxidized TMA, you're going to have a heart attack or stroke at an early age. By the way, all these studies that have been coming out saying, oh, cholesterol is not linked to a heart attack, those were all funded by the egg corporation. You can go and look at who's funding those studies and why are they funding it. So 10 out of the 12 studies that showed cholesterol is safe in the past decade came from the Egg Council, and another one came from the dairy, funded it. Anyway, eggs are also linked to asthma, huge link. That book I recommended in many slideshows, How Not to Die, He has a comprehensive website with lots of references. So as you're looking for your topic and references, he does a really good job. So nutritionfacts.org, so all one word. So that might be a good place to look for resources also. And he's already done a really nice job of summarizing some of the data, or then you can go and look at those articles. All right, our next categories. I lump these together and then we'll walk through them, are the monoamines and the polypeptides. So the monoamines and the polypeptides, like when we talked with them with hormones, they use a second messenger. And this is the idea. You don't need to know it in detail. You just need to know what I have highlighted in hot pink up there, that they work via a second messenger. So our first messenger, the ligand, the neurotransmitter, so in the case here, norepinephrine, binds the receptor. The receptor goes through a small change, which is usually that protein modification, the covalent modification that, John, you were asking me about yesterday in office hours. Anyway, a small change happens and it kicks this over. Once this binds and that change happens, and it activates another enzyme, and that enzyme activates the second messenger, and the second messenger is in the cell. This second messenger then goes and opens the gate. So there's a couple steps going on here. They have it as 6 separate steps. I have no idea, but the idea is the receptor is not the gate. This is going to take like a second, right, to go through this, but it's working through a second messenger. So one neurotransmitter binds, and then we get 1,000 of these guys down here, so we can open a lot of gates. So it's not as fast because these don't do things quite, don't need quite as fast, that instantaneous response. All right, so we're going to walk through the different ones, a couple of these. So the first one, it has a number because it's a molecule of meditation, so I'll get to that. It's called the happy neurotransmitter. I have a lot of problems with that name, but everybody identifies as a happy neurotransmitter because when you have low levels of serotonin, it is linked to depression. It's not the only thing, but it is the one that we seem to know a lot about and that everybody wants to know about. There are actually a whole slew of them involved in joy. But low serotonin is linked with depression, and low serotonin is also linked to rage. So an example of some really cool studies I've had students find in the past, one was chimpanzees, and they looked at these 2 groups of chimpanzees, and so they work in a community, and there's always an alpha. And when they looked at serotonin levels of the alpha, it perfectly coincided with how well the community worked together. So it's much more than happiness. So if the alpha male had normal serotonin, well, the group worked together very nicely. And if the alpha male was like the Hulk and had no serotonin, well, it turned out the community was not much of a community. I mean, they didn't really work together, and they bickered and stuff like that. So whatever happens to the Hulk, he has no serotonin, and that's why he has uncontrollable rage. Normal serotonin, oh, we have pills for that. Or meditation, joy, happiness. All the Tibetan monks I've had the honor to meet always have a smile on their face. The Sherpas also, such a sincere smile, always. And I get to that later in the talk. So another study is they put a divider up. So I'll say Joey and I are on different sides, and we have to play a video game against each other. And he doesn't know it's me on the other side. And Joey wins because he's much better at these games than me. And we have a zapper on our finger, and so he zaps me. And he just gives me a little zap. And so we're just zapping each other when the other one wins. So level 1 zap. And unbeknownst to Joey, they come around and they give me a drink that basically makes me like the Hulk. They knock out my serotonin. It doesn't matter if I'm depressed or angry. I'm just like not in the mood to play this, and I'm playing and I win, and I just hit, I don't care, 4 or 5. I'm going to zap you. And Joey's like, whoa, what's going on here? We were just doing tit for tat. And so then Joey starts getting angry. Naturally, his emotions are suppressing his serotonin. And so then he becomes kind of like the Hulk. So our attitude and our thoughts actually have a huge impact here. Just something to think about. And then they come around on my side and they give me another drink that increases my serotonin. So I go back to normal, but Joey's in the Hulk state. Anyway, interesting studies. Scientists from University of Montreal showed meditation has a direct impact on the brain's production of serotonin. It's part of why your next lab is to meditate. And I'll talk about that more at the end. So 90% of your serotonin receptors, where are they? Oh, here is, by the way, the pathway of how serotonin is made. So again, these are called the monoamines because they have this amino acid group, but they're also known as the amino acid derivatives. And that is because it was an amino acid, tryptophan. That's the whole thing where people say, oh, Thanksgiving, turkey has a lot of tryptophan, certain food has a lot, and so your body makes more serotonin. It has more to do with how happy your microbiome is. We'll get to that in a minute. And so what happens is first oxidation happens and oxygen gets put on, and then the a lyase happens and a CO2 group gets cut off. And so it's no longer an amino acid. It's an amino acid derivative or a monoamine. This one in the middle is 5-HT, 5-hydroxytryptophan, and it's really high in a lot of natural herbs that are used for people for sadness and depression. So like St. John's wort is really high in 5-HT, or some people will take 5-HT to help them with depression. All right, 90% of your receptors are located in your digestive tract. And you've all had butterflies in your belly, in your tummy. So when you get nervous about something, you get butterflies. And that is because 90% of the receptors are not actually in your brain. Yeah, this is always fun when I do this in class, because the ones who've had anatomy sit there and start yelling out parts of the brain because they're so smart. They've got all the parts of the brain down. And it's not about that. It turns out it's about your digestive system is regulating your level of happiness. And you all have done this. You ate something and it didn't go so well inside of you. And what happens to your emotions for the rest of the day? It's really hard to smile when you have an upset tummy. Yeah. And, or if you're constipated all the time. And some of you have told me when you started eating the 3 pieces of fruit for the 30 days, you're like, I feel a lot happier. Some of you actually have been with me for the whole year. So you've been making healthy changes for like 8 months now. And you're like, I'm in much a happier, joyous place. This is like amazing. And it is because what's in your gut? Well, besides getting things moving through, and the diarrhea and constipation drugs actually target serotonin. And meditation, people who meditate have a better digestive tract. Oh, over half of your cells. So I think the newest estimate is about 53% of the cells in your body are actually bacteria. And a high percentage of those are in your digestive tract, small intestine, large intestine, different ones. And what you eat determines what type you have. And they then determine how happy you are. Because serotonin, again, everybody calls it the happy neurotransmitter, but they are your perception of happiness. So if they're not happy, and I love this picture, because if you're feeding them processed meat and processed food, your microbiome does not like that 25% discretionary calories. They're going, whoa, respect us. They would like fiber, which is fruits and vegetables. They love legumes. They love fruit. Respect your own happiness and emotions. And it's not going to happen with one meal. It is a commitment. And you all have the time. All right, so these guys are struggling. They're not happy. And now we bring this in and much happier. So consider that. It all comes together. All right, this slide was made for my students last year. They were very into the gingerbread men, but serotonin is much more than happiness. It does regulate if you're going to be moody, which is happiness. We're going to talk about melatonin in a minute. Darkness converts serotonin into melatonin, so it has an impact on sleep and also on your appetite and digestion, as we talked about. In fact, autism has been linked to our microbiome. This is stuff from last year in 2019 that kids who's had a lot of antibiotics as children, their microbiome isn't as strong, and so their serotonin levels are off. Anyway, something to consider. Anxiety, and we don't need to be anxious these days. Good memory, perception, social behavior, sexual desire, all related to serotonin. So what you eat affects it, right? So we can learn all about the different receptors in the brain, and this is here and this is there, but 90% of the receptors are where again? Yeah, in the tummy. In the tummy. Keep your tummy happy so that you don't get all bloated and constipated. And when you're bloated, you all know when you're constipated, when things aren't moving right, it's really hard to be here happy. All right. So those little black boxes are going to keep appearing. I apologize. My competency with technology is apparently not what many of yours is probably. All right, agonist or antagonist. So we're going to play that game again. So this is very different from acetylcholine because since the receptor is not the gate, you can keep stimulating the receptor. With acetylcholine, we wanted to break it down. Here, we want to keep these guys in there. Keep stimulating the receptor, it keeps kicking next door, and you get that whole chain reaction. So a lot of depression medications either do this. So the MAO inhibitors, MAO is monoamine oxidase, and this is the little shark in here. And so it oxidizes all the monoamines. And so if you inhibit it, the serotonin will stay in there longer, and you'll keep stimulating, and you'll feel happy. Another idea is, so that would be an agonist. Agonist means, great, we keep stimulating, we stay happy. SSRI is selective serotonin reuptake. So the problem with the MAO inhibitors is you also keep getting more of the other monoamines. So you can still have the fear response. So then they came out with the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So serotonin doesn't get retaken back up, and so it stays in the synapse longer. So again, an agonist specifically for serotonin, which is beautiful. All right, another thing about serotonin, oh, well, here we go. You can do medication, or you can eat healthy. Bananas, walnuts, leafy greens. Oh, and those of you doing, like some of you have picked a second healthy change, which is great. I would encourage you to do something, go over the edge, push yourself. It's only for 30 days, and a lot of you need to push yourself. We'll talk about smiling in a minute, but if you want to do the water, a couple of people have said, yeah, I'm gonna drink 8 cups of water every day, 12 glasses of water. Then add a dimension to that and say, and that water, I'm going to always put gratitude, like put a heart on every glass in your house. And every time you drink a glass of water, you have to stop and take a deep breath. I'm not going to make you chew your water, but say praise and gratitude to where this water came from. Especially those of you who have children, when you pour the water for your children, give it to them. Make sure you bless it in there. All right. But yeah, walking clears the mind. All should go on walks. So hallucinogens tend to mimic serotonin. So this often seems to inspire people for their topic, these next few slides. So here is serotonin here. And then DMT is a big hallucinogen from the Amazon. And this is magic mushrooms. LSD is right there. So these are all called indoleamines. And so LSD, it has the group down here at the bottom. And so it binds the receptor and it can't be broken down. And so you hallucinate. It's just like you feel like it just keeps being stimulated. The receptor keeps being stimulated. The psilocybin is what comes from the magic mushrooms, and your gut bacteria actually pulls that phosphate off. They go, ooh, a phosphate. And now it becomes this. And it looks just like serotonin. Just this OH is over 1. And you see the wall breathing and you think everything's funny and all that stuff. I have no idea. I've never done any of these. I have no interest in it. Everybody I know has always said, well, you wouldn't need to, which I always thought was interesting. But I'm probably part of the 20% mutation that I get to in a couple slides. MDMA, ecstasy, this one fascinates me every time somebody does this paper. So it does, it releases a whole lot of serotonin. It just agonist, right? You get the mother load of serotonin. Well, not the mother load, because moms are happy for other reasons. But you become very happy and you love everyone. You're just like, everyone's beautiful, which we all should be this way. So this is normally, you're releasing serotonin and you can feel joy. And then ecstasy says, oh, I'm going to keep releasing. I'm going to release all of it. And your body goes, whoa, what just happened? Now, the thing that's interesting is meditation will get you here gently. And then you always stay there because you've naturally built up your ability for this. But when you do it with pow, boom, your body goes, what happened? And it turns off making the serotonin. And so when you come down from that the next day, and for several days after, your body has stopped making serotonin. So you're not at normal. You're in a place of depression and irritability. Students have told me, they're like, yeah, you just stay in your room for a couple days. But boy, the joy and happiness was so worth it. And I'm like, how could it be? If you're in sadness then for days after, for a few hours of joy. And what happens when you do it frequently? Well, eventually your body goes, no, and you actually cause harm to the actual nerves. Doesn't make sense. Or you could just meditate. So people, when they meditate, you can see in the meditation session, half hour, you do go up. This yellow line is people who meditate, become established in their practice. Oh, wait a minute, why are they starting out twice as high? Yeah, they're starting out with double the happiness. And then as they meditate, they're ending up triple as high at the end of their meditation. That's why you're going to start finding where it's at. All right, let's talk about melatonin. It gets a number. It's another molecule of meditation, and everybody knows it as the sleep molecule. So we'll talk about that. It is so much more. Nobody's picked serotonin as a topic or any of the hallucinogens. Absolutely, they have medicinal uses if you have a guide, for what that's worth. Melatonin's pretty cool topic. So it is made from serotonin. And when you have complete darkness, the enzyme changes it. So we get a transferase happens, and there we go. We make melatonin, and it's released from the pineal gland, which is in between your eyebrows, right? So the third eye releases it in total darkness. It regulates appetite, anxiety, memory, perception, and yes, meditation. You double, just like serotonin. That makes sense, because if serotonin's getting doubling, the melatonin must be. But everybody's always focused on serotonin and saying, oh, I feel happier. You're going to see in the next few slides. My perception has changed. It's about all of them. Melatonin's the big one. In meditators, if you have a consistent practice, if you can keep going and going, it's an addiction that is the best addiction ever. 300%. So 98% means you're pretty much double. And 300% means a four-fold level of melatonin, four-fold, which is extremely protective. But you need total darkness. All right, look at the sleep. Isn't that amazing? I love that picture. So it is much more than sleep. It regulates our circadian rhythms. So we have rhythms of when things are released in our body. And it is, this is in hot pink fuchsia color. It is the most powerful antioxidant in our body. It is 5 times more powerful than vitamin C. Yeah, of course you can take it in a pill. It doesn't work the same. You need your body to be making it. So while you sleep, your body repairs and replaces cells. It's called mitosis, but that produces free radicals. And so your body already said, okay, we know we're going to be going through the repair phase. We need something to mop up after all the mess. And that's what melatonin is. So while you're sleeping, your body's repairing, and melatonin's going around mopping it up, and not just cleaning up that mess, but any of the other mess left from the day. Sleep is so crucial. I had some students last term, they said this was their 30-day challenge, but you would have had to start, you got to start like right now. And they were like, I'm going to get sleep. There's 2 more capacities, 2 more levels with the sleep, and I'll mention them as we go through this. This is why in the morning, if you look in the mirror, you always look younger and rejuvenated. And I remember saying this last term, and my class was like, it's the 5th, 6th week, and they're like, oh, I don't feel rejuvenated. I look really tired in the morning. And then we all did the meditation and they changed their mind. But low melatonin is sleep interrupted. We all know about that. But your immune system becomes suppressed because the best antioxidant in your body is not being produced. You cannot produce melatonin unless you sleep in total darkness. So there's 2 parts there, complete darkness and sleep. You also have much higher levels of heart disease and cancer. Cancer is linked to low melatonin. Melatonin, oncostatic, means it stops cancer. Cancer cells actually don't want to be cancer. So they have a receptor on them saying, please, melatonin, come here and help us. And so melatonin, it doesn't destroy them. It just slows them down so they can go back to normal. And so sleep. So prostate cancer patients, and they looked at their levels of melatonin, they found they had half the normal. And autism, I already mentioned, with serotonin, they also had half the normal. So again, the gut bacteria is off. You're not doing the serotonin, so you're not going to have the melatonin. Your diet is related to how well you sleep. You got to eat fiber, and you cannot get fiber from animal products or processed food. It has to be fiber that was in the natural state. So adding the fiber in doesn't do the same thing. Adding the fiber in after might get things moving through your intestines, but it doesn't feed your microbiome. This one that's in pink there, 1/10 the normal melatonin in breast cancer patients. 1/10. When they looked at patients with breast cancer, their melatonin levels are just not there. And so the cancer is going crazy. Night shift workers have 50% higher rates of breast cancer. All right. Yeah, you have to sleep in total darkness. There have been studies showing that women who sleep with a night lamp or the light on in the bathroom have higher rates of breast cancer. So for Mother's Day, Joey actually got me this amazing sleep mask. It's not one shaped like a kitty cat, although that's adorable. And my sleep was already amazing, but it just went like to a whole new level, which is amazing. All right. And then the other thing that we did, I don't remember if I talked about it. I know I did with my other class, was EMFs and melatonin. So EMFs are electromagnetic fields. We give off an electromagnetic field. You've heard me mention we are much more than physical beings. We are vibrational. And we have created man-made vibrations. And those would be when radio waves came out, World War II. There was a change that happened. And then all the cell phone. The thing that's interesting is they researched themselves. So your bedroom, my bedroom does not look like this. You got to unplug your bedroom. TV set, we don't even have a TV in our house anymore. Computers are not in anybody's bedroom. Most people have things plugged in all over their bedroom. You got to unplug your bedroom. And then this whole push to 5G. So when this whole going online happened, Joey was much more ready than me, and he actually got us a new Wi-Fi. So I don't know if I freeze during our Zoom sessions. I guess if I do, you can think I just went into a deep meditation. But the Wi-Fi, and I did not place the connection. It took me 2 weeks to place the connection, but I became like a zombie for 2 weeks. And I just thought it was because I was being overwhelmed with the changes that I was having to do to try to make my class somewhat. This was this beautiful package that I had created for this class and had the most beautiful experience last term. And so trying to recreate it in this world was a bit daunting. And it suddenly occurred to me after 2 weeks of just, the first few days, you just figure it's going to go away. And then you're like, oh, maybe I have the coronavirus or whatever, whatever. But I finally, one day, I just woke up and I said, Joey, you need to turn that Wi-Fi off. And so he programmed it. It goes off at 9 o'clock at night. It doesn't come on until 6 in the morning. And my sleep went back to normal. My behavior went back to normal. And then all I can think about is I have to share that message because all of you have that Wi-Fi, and if the Wi-Fi is on 24 hours a day, it is sending it out through your whole house. And if you have children, yeah, you can program it. It's so simple to do that it just goes off for like 8 or 12 hours a day. You can survive without it. And the cell phone, right? Everyone sleeps with it next to them. But this guy's a big one, your Wi-Fi. All right, EMFs do interfere with bird migration. So every time we've upped it, and we're going through that right now with the whole 5G, bird migration changes. So geese, the flock of geese, they migrate. It is a morphogenic field. They've actually shown that now. So that's what these fields are called. And I think I have a picture in the next slide. And bees, actually next week is World Bee Day. So natural electromagnetism is how bees communicate and tell each other what's going on. And the bee population is 70% down from what it was, like, I forget, 20 years ago or however many. And marine mammals, you all probably know the story about them. And so they communicate, right, with sound waves, and they have had issues. And there's a big fear of what's going on now as the world moves into 5G. So this is from a slide from UCLA. Deterioration of melatonin, which is our big free radicals mopper-upper, destroys healthy blood cells, breaks apart DNA strands, changes our brain cells. We get leaks, so we can't communicate. And so, this is all about your brain. And so they say that, how can we keep saying that the power companies regulate themselves? They fund the studies. They give people funding, and these are new researchers, and they just want to make an impact, and they're desperate for money. And they're like, okay, I'll take money from anyone. Okay. And they're called file cabinet research, where they put the bad studies in a file cabinet. You've seen them in those boxes and boxes of storage stuff in those movies. They're filled with all the studies that nobody wants you to know about. Your DNA's there. Your DNA does get affected because it's a vibration. We'll talk about that next week. So what about harmonious vibrations through meditation and beautiful thoughts and good vibes and smiling? Thank you again for all the cheesy pictures. Some of you sent really funny pictures, and I really enjoyed that. So researchers, again, 98, doubling with meditation. Think what I'm doing for you with this lab. 300%, so fourfold increase with a consistent practice. And this was really cool. As I was reading, going down my rabbit hole of melatonin this past week, when mom sings a lullaby to her child, mom and baby's heart go into synchronicity or coherence, and the whole house does. It's really beautiful. You should all sing. So morphogenic field, that is this guy, Rupert Sheldrake. He is a doctorate in science, and he just started looking into these. And you'll hear more of me talking about vibrations, because that's what it's all about. That's what chemistry is all about. That's what electrons are. Because have any of you ever seen an electron? All right, you just took it for granted. So how can any of these molecules exist? Because of your thoughts. So we're going to make dopamine, tyrosine, amino acid. This is a beautiful picture. This is how you're going to all show it on your midterm. Ionized, fully ionized. Oh, and then a change happens. So a hydroxylase, we add an oxygen here. Remember, there was a hydrogen. Now we just added an oxygen. So it's an oxidoreductase. And now we remove the CO2. So that was a lyase. And so it's why it's called a monoamine, because it has only one, it doesn't have the CO2, it's an amino acid derivative. And then the dopamine gets changed into noradrenaline, so it gets oxidized again. And then the noradrenaline, its other name is norepinephrine, gets changed into adrenaline or epinephrine. So they're the same, noradrenaline and norepinephrine are the same. So dopamine, back to dopamine. Dopamine is our reward neurotransmitter. It's what makes you pay attention. So you can take a break whenever you want. That's the beauty of slideshows of YouTube in class. We'd probably take a break after dopamine. So you're paying attention, you're in red. You get excited about something. Kids with attention deficit, they don't have enough dopamine, or somehow it's not doing its thing, and so they don't pay attention. So they're always acting up. And so some people figure we can spank them, or we can give them medication. We'll talk about Ritalin in a moment. Or we can just give them medication and keep giving them a lot of sugar. And they're going to keep behaving like this, and we just keep going down this path. Or we can give them healthy food with lots of phytochemicals, make their microbiome happy. Acupuncture has a really wonderful effect, and hugs also have the most beautiful, beautiful effect. Hugs are amazing. All right, so there's a picture of dopamine. Again, it's got the amino group and not the carboxy group. It's actually a really complex one to talk about. There are at least 5 different types of receptors, such as say 5 receptor types throughout the body, but dopamine, low dopamine is associated with Parkinson's because dopamine also coordinates your muscle movement. So where acetylcholine was your muscles moving, dopamine coordinates. So again, this one's working slower, but we do need coordination of our body moving. Linked with emotions, so bipolar, and the obsessive compulsive disorder is a dopamine, not paying attention, right? Attention deficit, and focus. I don't watch scary movies, so never saw that. And your ability to plan and feeling rewarded. So it creates memories of pleasurable experience, so it can happen again and again and again. And so it is extremely addictive because you want that pleasurable experience again and again and again. So cocaine and meth, both the street drugs that are extremely addictive, those two work via dopamine. And so your brain, right, normal brain, and after using cocaine, and so what happens here is cocaine blocks what would bring the dopamine back in. So normal dopamine and cocaine, you get higher levels, so the receptors keep being stimulated, and you get whatever that high buzz, whatever it is. And meth is just cheaper and just nasty. I showed the slide a long time ago at the beginning of the term. Normal, cocaine, sugar. Sugar also is works via this. It overstimulates your dopamine. You want more and more and more. And then what happens is your body stops producing the dopamine. And now you have low levels. But you want to get back to here, and so you have to have more and more and more. And so that's the idea. We have this obsession with pleasure and happiness, but the pleasure trap was talked about in that movie. So sugar destroys your brain. We saw this slide before, but it's worth looking at again. 2 commercial baked goods per week just to double the rate of depression. Oh, we have a pill for that, right? Or we could stop eating crap. Make your own, because yours will have love in it and can have less sugar, no sugar. Use dates, so it's whole food. Add carrots, so there's even more fiber, and no oils. And it's because sugar is a free radical, so you get this oxidative stress, and it changes the reward center. So you get an overstimulation of dopamine, so you just want that pleasure again. And there's the brain shrinkage. None of us want to look like that. That's like a cocaine addict's brain. Sugar addiction, not a good thing. So I had this lovely student from Vietnam who asked me this last night, and she said, but Dr. Sherpa, you told me to eat 3 fruits a day, but I looked it up, and bananas have a lot of sugar, and they have too many calories. I think I'm just going to eat this. And so I was trying to explain to her, and I'll explain again, because I can't emphasize this enough. In the whole food, the sugar and the fiber are bound together, and then there's all these other nutrients, and when you take it as a pill, it doesn't absorb correctly into your body. It doesn't work the same way. So you're not getting all the sugar. A lot of that sugar actually is passing through you, and also the sugar that does get absorbed, it's coming with a vibrational frequency, and your body knows what to do with it, and it uses it. It doesn't store it. And if you eat fruit, your microbiome will be happy, you'll be happy, and your brain will be just vibrant. All right. Yeah, supplements don't have the same effect. So there's these crazy, and every one of these slides online is different. And I have this here because it drives me crazy, but dopamine is your reward, your pleasure, your drive. Serotonin, usually people think of it as happiness, but right, it's obsession and compulsion. And noradrenaline is part of the fight or flight, and it's like, which one's which? They're all monoamines. You do need to know that all 3 of those are monoamines, and we all just want to be happy. So rather than learning all these little details, let's just be happy. Children know how to be happy. And there's Olivia. She's going, let's all be happy. Let's all be happy. All right. Noradrenaline and adrenaline are 2 different molecules, but they are associated with our fight or flight response. So the fear response, the stress response. Yeah. And so again, adrenaline is also known as epinephrine, but it's what gets our heart rate going. And so fear, lack of control, feeling judged, stress, so fight or flight, or you do have a choice, choosing love, and you produce the hormones and neurotransmitters that make you feel loved and safe and supported. So oxytocin, these are polypeptide ones over here. We talked about, that's a hormone, and endorphins we're going to talk about now. So endorphins are a polypeptide, so a long chain of amino acids, not super long, it's 8 or 12, can't remember right now. And this is interesting, it binds the opioid receptor. There's morphine. Morphine's been around for thousands and thousands of years, and we know it deals with pain. And so they said, well, if we have a receptor, we must have something in our body, and we do. And they called it endorphin when they found it about 50 years ago, which stands for endogenous, inside us, morphine. And your body naturally produces it. So it's probably this area here or down here, somehow how it folds. Morphine can stimulate the receptor. It is our perception of pain. It's our perception. Something unique about humans. We can have a perception. We can create things. Acupuncture, yes, we have pills. All the pain meds are targeting endorphins. So nothing happens to the endorphin. It's binding the receptor and your body stops producing endorphins. So then you need more and more of the medication. Acupuncture is fascinating because it actually helps your body to release its own endorphins. And that's why it's so effective for pain. And dark chocolate is also something that helps us with our endorphins. All right. The receptors are called enkephalin receptors, and sometimes people call endorphins enkephalins. You have the receptors on your immune system and your digestive. So, yeah, that's interesting. Your brain is the only place in your body that doesn't have pain receptors, even though that's where we think we feel the pain. Do you stub your toe? Do you feel the pain in your toe, or is it your perception in your brain? Something to think about. It is not, there should be a red X that comes over this. It is not actually the runner's high. That is one later on. And when you smile, you release endorphins. So I love this slide. Whenever I show it, everyone in the room sighs and just goes, oh, and you just relax a little bit more. So you're like, oh, because it's a baby. Oh, trust me, if you smile, especially on Zoom, where all I see is your face, it has a huge impact on me. And I'm the one writing your exams and stuff. So smile, help me to release more endorphins. And I keep trying to smile for that reason too, for you. All right, Qigong, meditation, belly dancing helps to release endorphins. And this is just a really cool TED Talk, but we're not going to watch it. There's Kenna, for those of you who know her, there's Olivia. And another thing that released, there's me in the background behind Kenna. And Kenna came and helped me with the milk lab, which I did with the kids. She missed the milk lab, and so she came and helped me volunteering. Being of service to be of service is huge, and it helps release endorphins because it puts you in a state of love, of choosing love, releases endorphins. Oh, gluten does not release endorphins because gluten, which is a wheat protein, also gliadin, is digested into small peptides. So what happened is we changed wheat. This has been in the past couple decades. So when I was a kid, wheat used to be taller than me, and it's not that I'm that much taller now. I'm really not. We changed wheat so we could harvest it twice a year. And that changed the protein in it. And our body has the perfect enzymes, the perfect proteins to digest everything, except when we keep modifying stuff, we don't have the enzymes to cut this down to single amino acids. So our proteases can only cut between certain amino acids, and this now is the wrong sequence. And so it cannot be cut all the way down to single amino acids by our body, and you get tripeptides. And we're all sensitive to it. Some of us are not sensitive enough to know that we're sensitive. It is an exorphin. So there's our endorphin, one of them. There's also, this is, I think, alpha endorphin, and the beta endorphin is really cool. It actually makes a full circle. And you can see it looks just like it. And so this is an exogenous endorphin. And it also binds the opioid receptor, and it changes our perception to pain. It also changes our ability to produce endorphins because your body's like, I keep stimulating this receptor. But what happens is you eat more because you don't want to feel pain. And you keep eating 26 additional pounds per year per person. And with this pandemic, people are eating more. Instead of making it a healthy choice and going for walks every day and cooking healthier meals, but you're all doing that. And you're telling the people in your life that. But since the 1950s, the average man in this country has gained 50 to 75 pounds heavier than the average man was back 70 years ago. You guys all look nice and slim. You all look like you're around 32-inch waist. Go out and look at the average man out there in the store. Yeah, it's not pretty. All right. This is actually considered to be more like 85% of Americans are overweight. And obesity is considered to be close to 40% now, so 35%. The numbers originally, they were just made up arbitrarily. You can ask me, I'll send you a YouTube that talks about it. And the reason for that has to do what's happened in the past 70 years. So an increase, this is not in 30 years, this should be in 40 years, almost 2,000%, 2,000, not 200, 2,000. Yeah, 48 billion per year in cells, highly processed. The gluten-free crap, highly processed. A friend of mine went to their house, and I was silly and told her I don't eat gluten. And they're from India. They don't eat gluten either. So they went out and bought me like $100 worth of highly processed gluten-free food. And I was too kind to tell them that I didn't eat processed food. So now I just tell people I just eat around whatever they have. And I left there so constipated. It was the longest 4-hour drive back to my mom's. Joey, when I was taping this the first time, not taping it, but rehearsing, he was just laughing because he remembers that trip. And I was just like, oh my gosh. We ended up throwing it out the window or something. I don't know what we did with all of it. It changes your behavior, induces pleasure, withdrawal. It actually causes your intestines to become more absorbing. And you actually absorb this where you're not supposed to, and you have a reaction. And so some people think, okay, you get stomach cramps and stuff. It affects your emotions because it's affecting your gut, which is where the serotonin, so it's interfering also with the serotonin. And once I realized that, I realized whenever I ate bread, I would often go into a place of sadness. And then I thought, was I always sad? Because if I stay away from gluten, I can stay in this place of joy. It takes almost 2 weeks to clear it out. And it's not that you suddenly are like, oh, I'm in joy. It was when, you kind of feel like that too. There's a lot to it. Anyway, you don't become diabetic from eating salmon, blueberries, garlic, and asparagus. Just like heroin, it binds the opioid receptor. So let's talk about that receptor for a moment. So there's morphine and heroin. They bind it. Those are exogenous. Now, if you want to be a heroin addict, gluten's doing the same thing. Naloxone is what they give heroin addicts to block it. And then these are the ones that we prescribe for pain medicine. They're doing the same thing. Highly, highly addictive. There's so many people addicted because they're so afraid of pain. The thing that they found is when they give people naloxone, you decrease your food consumption. So it's actually a new weight loss medication also, and for smoking cessation. So there's a picture of that. And they're showing me, this is me, death by chocolate. Chocolate has an opioid in it. That's why it's so hard to give up chocolate. I've tried. I've accepted. It's not going to happen. That will be my death, is chocolate. But that was the last time I had ice cream, actually. That was 5 or 6 years ago. 5 years ago. We drove across the country. All right, this is kind of cool. This is me trying to inspire you. You guys got to pick a topic. You got to pick topics. I am slowly getting emails. I need more emails. All right, so you've all had where you crashed on your bike when you were a little kid and you want your mom said and your mom kissed it and you went, oh, it feels better. Well, that is the whole love effect. But it turns out your spit has this molecule and it's more powerful than morphine. I know this one actually looks more like the endorphin and it's not addictive, probably because it looks more like the endorphin. So in Paris, they injected rats. They hurt the rats. How can you do this? This is so inhumane. And then they spat on them. Well, no, they injected them with human spit. And the rats stopped licking their wound and started playing the fiddle. And then they said to the rats, walk across a bed of nails, of needles, because they're little, they're rats. And the rats that they spat on, they did it. And they didn't complain because they didn't feel pain. They didn't perceive pain. Go figure. Have fun with your research papers. All right. And if you need money for summer school, there you go. You can sell your spit. And just remember, your kisses are magic. Not just for the love. It turns out, at the molecular level, the love created the perfect molecule. And Dracula's saliva does save lives. So there's an enzyme in it. So when they bite the cow's neck, the blood doesn't coagulate, and they thought about that, and so stroke patients have to do with blood clots. So if they can give them this enzyme, they can actually disintegrate the clot. If they give it to them right away, it's like a certain amount of time, and they walk out of the hospital. It's pretty amazing. All right, next category, amino acid neurotransmitters. So again, vesicle, synapse goes across. I don't know if these work by a second messenger. Examples, again, this is wonderful examples because they're showing them ionized, how they would be in your body. So glutamic acid and GABA are examples. A lot of medications are trying to mimic GABA. So sometimes this inspires people. Yeah, and it causes the gate to stay open or something like that. All right, so gets a number, and that's because it's called the calming neurotransmitter. So this is a bad slide because they did not ionize. So that H should not be there, and this should be an NH3 positive, but glutamate would be the correct name. It excites your neurons, and so it makes you alert, or not necessarily alert, but so your brain is aware, let's say aware. And GABA, which this just gets modified to this, so the carboxyl group gets cut off, but it's considered still an amino acid because it still has that group, actually tones it down. So the two of them in balance help to sharpen your focus, and it is a balance. One of the problems with medication is they're all targeting one, and they're forgetting about the other. And so people talk about it as monkey mind. And so when you meditate, you're getting rid of monkey mind. Monkeys already have toned down the chatter. They don't have all the chatter going on. That's why they can sit quietly. And they do. You only hear them chatter when there's something they need to chatter about. But their minds are calm. All right, anti-anxiety medications are trying to mimic GABA and somehow to calm down the brain chatter. And of course, meditation, 27% increase. It was more powerful than exercise at stimulating GABA. And addictions, whatever your addiction is, usually there's a low GABA. And I know I joke that I'm addicted to chocolate, but there is a difference between people who are like, I have to have it, I have to have it, and saying, oh, I'm going to have a piece of chocolate. Or so having a cup of coffee, black coffee, it's not going to be a bad thing, but that you can't survive without it, that's where you got to talk about your choice of words, perhaps. GABA apparently interacts with the pancreas. All right, that's up for grabs too. Oh, there's my monks. So I had the opportunity, and this was 25 years ago, that I got to teach some Tibetan monks how to speak English. Sunam, who's next to me in the blue, he never spoke a word of English. That's how good of a teacher I am. He was one of the most enlightened people I've ever had the honor to meet. He died from liver cancer like 20 years ago. He absolutely adored Joey. Anyway, they were always, you can see he's always smiling. And so the other two speak English, by the way, just to let you know. Wasn't that bad of a teacher. And Sunam and I could communicate beautifully. You don't need words to communicate all the time. All right, so there is adenosine is the neurotransmitter. It slows down everything so you sleep. Isn't that an adorable picture? All right, you feel sleepy, your blood vessels dilate, and everything's beautiful. So there's caffeine, there's adenosine, and this was in the other category. It is a nucleotide, and then caffeine looks similar, it just has these extra methyl groups, and caffeine would be an antagonist because caffeine does not slow you down. So caffeine is somehow blocking the receptor. Somebody has already picked caffeine as their topic. So they can go into more detail about this, and so you become more alert. All right, so it blocks the receptor, and that would be an antagonist. All right, our last molecule is the number one. So anandamide. So this is me doing my meditation, and anandamide. So this would be our fatty acid, and then it gets modified here. So it's a modified fatty acid. And anandamide was discovered first in 1992, or isolated, not discovered. And it comes from the Sanskrit word for Ananda. He was one of Buddha's helpers. And when he became enlightened, the word Ananda means bliss. So I always said I didn't know my name couldn't be translated into Sanskrit. And that's because they don't actually have a word for joy. They have the word for bliss. So even more than happiness, you're in bliss. And an amide is the fatty acid gets modified and becomes an amide. So it's anandamide. My meditation teacher was talking about this, and she had trouble saying this word. Meditators can say the ananda, they have trouble with the amide, and then chemists usually can say the amide, and they just stumble over Ananda's name. Anyway, it's an agonist. It binds what is called the CB1 receptor. This receptor is found in nearly every tissue in your body, and most animals also. It is an endo, meaning inside us, cannabinoid, and is made from an omega-6 fatty acid. And in case you don't know what a cannabinoid is, that is marijuana, which means exogenous. So yes, that is where we're going with this one. So every one of the street drugs is somehow interfering or trying to mimic something that's already in you. So this is the cool part. Fatty acid amide hydrolase. This is the enzyme. So anandamide is broken down by this enzyme. And then you're not in bliss, because anandamide made you blissful. But what if you are a mutant? What a great mutation to have. And it turns out, I'm pretty sure, you can become this mutant. And I'll talk about that over the next few slides. 1 in 5 people, and you all know somebody who's like this, they're just always happy. No matter what, they're happy. I have a theory. Children, when they're small children, they don't have this enzyme yet. And then at puberty, this enzyme gets activated and their level of joy drops. All right. Anyway, if you don't have the enzyme, you have enhanced levels of happiness. You are like that happiness you remember as a child when you had the happiness. So up north, University of Calgary compared a group of happy humans, and they injected the gene. Yes, they've actually found the gene. We'll talk about genetics next week after your midterm, into these rats. And they found both the men who were always happy. Yeah, I'm thinking the 20% are all the people at high elevations. So maybe high elevation gives you the genetic mutation. Because the Sherpas also always smiling. And they came from Tibet, so they are the same people. Higher levels of anandamide and a greater ability to extinguish fear-based memories. Something really important right now. And this connectivity between parts of the brain gave them better cognitive planning and more emotional memory. Happy man, happy mouse. Better communication means lower anxiety and higher emotional stability. Oh, look at reference. You guys will have references. All right. So the more a person exercises. So it's a question some people have been sending me emails. Sometimes the really scientific journals, it's hard to read them. Sometimes it's easier to read somebody who's already read it and then go back and look at it. But you do need to put it in your words. I don't want big block quotes from these journals where you have no idea what they're saying. The more you exercise, this is the Brenner's High. The more anandamide you make, it's an analgesic, pain reliever. It's anxiety reliever, and it helps your body release dopamine. When this happens naturally, through diet, through exercise, through meditation, it is an amount your body knows what to deal with, and you don't then get a down regulation. You get normal. You get beyond normal. You probably do get normal. I have a new quote: stop being normal and start being natural. So don't try to be the norm. Just be you. All right, so meditation. Regular practitioners have much higher levels. And my theory is you actually, with regular practice, turn the gene off so it doesn't break down. So the anandamide just keeps going and keeps you in a state of bliss. And we're going to get to the lab in a minute. Service. So this is me making the slime from after we curdled the milk. I made slime. When you are of service for no reason at all other than to be playful and to be of service, you have increased levels of anandamide. And again, children always have high levels of anandamide. All right. So THC stimulates the receptor, so it's an agonist. And CBD actually inhibits the enzyme. Why they actually have very different effects on your body, similar but yet different. THC is interesting though, because it's an external component stimulating then the receptor. People who smoke THC don't behave the same as people who meditate. People who meditate aren't called dopey. They don't call meditation dope for short. So, you know, smoking marijuana is not part of Lab 6. It is meditation. So there's what is naturally produced in your body. And this is THC. So you can see it's an agonist. They look just alike. I love this quote down here because they're saying our body makes something just like this. Why don't we change the perspective? Say, oh, Mother Nature makes something just like that. There are some medicinal uses for THC. Absolutely understand that and agree with that. But when you pick your paper, I would like you to look at both pros and cons. A healthy look at both sides. All right, healthy brain and just a weekend user. It's interesting. Also, they found with people under a certain age, under 25, it does have impacts that are not so good because the brain behaves different before you're 25. And so it interferes with learning. And having been a teacher and seeing the increase in use of this, yeah. All right, another research, it's chemical messenger between the embryo and uterus. It is one of the first, if not the first, communication between mom and baby. And so if the mom is exposed to THC, so they exposed the mother mouse to THC while she was pregnant and saw lower survival rates and also several abnormalities amongst the born. So something to consider. All right. And again, a reminder, you need to find research. Sometimes you might be surprised what your research finds. And I'm blinded. I only find good research on chocolate. Nobody's picked chocolate as a topic. Fascinating. Anyway, dark chocolate has N-acetylethanolamine, which prevents the breakdown of anandamide. That would be an agonist because the anandamide just stays there naturally and keeps stimulating. It's kind of hard to overdose on dark chocolate. And then there's 3 molecules that help to actually stimulate the receptor. So it is chemistry. There's our periodic table. All right, so we're almost at the end. And molecules of meditation. Just real quick. So we talked about that, the molecules of meditation. A real quick question for you. Does everything I've just talked about, which is that we can explain this, does it really? Does reducing everything to molecules in a mechanistic, reductionist way explain consciousness? Can we reduce our consciousness to that? Something to ponder. Or are you much more? Is it your vibrational being, your thoughts, your attitude, your choice of love that creates the molecules? So the chakra system, again, your heart chakra is the biggest one. They've done a lot of studies. When we get to DNA, I will talk about that more. And so I wanted to talk about your lab. Mindful in May is a global meditation. Perhaps I've sparked some ideas for a paper. So Lab 6 is meditation. I posted a little page of what you need to do. I recommend a guided meditation because it helps you all have distractions in your life. People moving around. So putting headphones on, go in your room, close the door, go outside, close the door, and find a quiet place for 20 minutes. It's going to take you a couple days to figure this out. That's why you get 2 weeks. Start now. because it's going to take you a couple days. My suggestions will probably not work for you. Occasionally a student likes one of my suggestions. My suggestions change each term as I change. So it was just some place to start with. Everybody has a preference for voice. This picture is to remind you to smile when you meditate. I don't care if you sit with your legs crossed. I don't care how you sit, but you either need to sit or lie down, not walking. Walking is actually a very advanced form of meditation, and I'm doubting most of you are quite there yet. Anyway, I absolutely love Dr. Joe Dispenza's Ho'oponopono is a meditation from Hawaii. There's many versions of it online. Most students, I haven't had a student like Dr. Joe's meditation yet because it's a half hour and you're like, oh, a half hour. It's meditation for Mama Earth, and it's beautiful. So this is Joey meditating on Mama Earth, posed at age 11. This is in the Himalayas. That's a 7,000 meter peak back there. So we're hiking to the highest lake in the world. And he's choosing love. He's kind of giggling there in the picture. And that's me meditating in looking over Idaho. So I'm in Oregon, I'm looking towards Idaho. And so I also, when you meditate on love. Is beautiful. That's the purpose of meditation. It is not about sitting with your spine perfect. So I put Joey here. Joey is who inspired this lab because I watch him every day. He decided a couple years ago to read the Bible. So he reads the Bible. He's now read it 2 times or 3 times through. And then he sits and meditates on the page or 2 that he read. And so what I found last term, some students found they didn't like listening to the guided meditation. And each student came up to me. I asked them, well, do you read the Bible? Oh, yeah, I've always wanted to. So start with Psalms if you've never read the Bible. It's a really wonderful place to start. And read a psalm, and then just sit for 20 minutes and meditate on love, or meditate on the psalm or the verse in the Bible. Again, I recommend headphones. You can lay down or sit down. There is standing meditation. I do that sometimes if I'm having trouble sitting, but you can sit in a chair, whatever works for you. You have to find the spot, the position that works, and the time of day. I love meditating daytime. First thing in the morning, complete silence because it's silent out. This time of day, the sun's out, I do my standing meditation, Qigong. Joey also found morning was best for him. My students have almost always found right before bed. They like doing it right before going to bed, and they often fell asleep. That is okay because that's what you needed. That's why I said it might take more than 7 days. Some of them said they never made it through it, but they said they've never slept like this in their life. And my students have all admitted, they said, I was so afraid of this. I was so afraid. I didn't enjoy this for the first 4 days. And then they found their groove. They found the meditation that worked for them. And they said, I've got my whole family doing this now. Anyway, sounds, some people like just sound. We are vibrational. And it is about breathing. You will naturally slow down. They will talk slowly. I often, if I'm doing my silent meditation and I'm having trouble silencing myself, I focus on my heart. I actually do sending love to each of you every day, which is tough this term because some of you I've never seen. But so please come to office hours and let me see you. Help me. But I go back to one of Thich Nhat Hanh's meditations, and he won the Nobel Peace Prize, Vietnamese monk, amazing man. So breathing and smiling. And there's my monks again, and there's Sunam playing, he's oming. He could do great ohms. That's the only word I understood that he said. Oh, and we are done. And so many blessings. I hope you find your meditation. Many blessings. I have to go to a meeting now. All right.